Hello and welcome to Carved in Stone. I'm your host, Shawn Chabam, and today, in honor of being July 3rd and the 41st anniversary of my favorite film's release, I'll be giving you my Mount Rushmore of secondary Back to the Future characters. The people who make Hill Valley feel alive, even when they're only on screen for a few minutes. Before the first reveal, let me tell you that characters from all three Back to the Future films are eligible, and let me tell you which characters I'm considering ineligible because they're main characters. Obviously Marty and Doc, but I wanted to go deeper with this list, so I'm also considering these characters as main ones. George, Lorraine, and Biff. And I'm also eliminating Buford and Clara, as they were mainstays in Part 3. Part 2, while it does introduce Griff, he isn't in the film long, despite being part of a pivotal scene, so I'll say he's eligible, but I'll tell you right now, he's not on here either. I don't consider Jennifer a main character, but she doesn't make it today. She's really dead weight. The writers even admit that if they knew how successful the first film was going to be and that it would spawn sequels, they never would have put her in the car at the end of Part 1 because she wasn't needed, hence her being unconscious for most of Parts 2 and 3. Well, I said I wanted to dig deeper today, and then I immediately contradict myself with the first reveal, since I am a slacker. Mr. Strickland. Really not too deep a dive here, although I don't think there's any argument you could make to consider Strickland a main character. So, the pick, it does make sense. He has limited camera time, but is always entertaining when he is on screen. We're actually introduced to Strickland before we're introduced to Doc, when the former confronts Marty about McFly's fourth tardy in a row. We can see Strickland and Marty have butted heads before, and that the principal isn't a big fan of the McFly family in general when he gets nose-to-nose with Marty and says, "No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley." We also see Strickland in 1955 interacting with George, treating him similarly to Marty. Part 2 is where he's most important, though. He takes what Marty believes is a sports almanac from Biff. Marty hilariously captures the book from Strickland's office, only to find out what he really got was the book cover and a copy of Ooh La La. I always think it's a hoot that Strickland looks exactly the same in 1955 and 1985. Marty wonders if that guy ever had hair. James Tolkien, who plays Strickland, is also in Part 3 as Marshall Strickland, the sheriff of Hill Valley. I'm not going to say anything else about that character because it technically is a different person, not on this mountain. Strickland's looks are great. He's funny when he speaks, but what puts him over the top for me is the way he shoots daggers with his eyes at Marty. When the Big M almost gets into a fight with Biff in the cafeteria, and after Marty goes nuts on guitar on Johnny Be Good. These looks alone earn him a spot on the mountain. Next, although he has extremely limited camera time, I always enjoy watching Sam Baines. He's so negative toward Marty, and rightfully so. Marty did jump out in front of Sam's car, albeit to save George from getting hit after the elder Peeping Tom McFly falls out of a tree. The 50s were a wild time, man. Instead of taking Marty to the hospital, Sam yells for his wife to help bring George inside. Marty inside. It should have been George, but it ended up being Marty. He says, "Another one of these damn kids jumped in front of my car," implying something like this has happened before. This, of course, is a pivotal moment in the film as it allows the real plot to develop, but Sam's role from here is comedic. You'd think, no matter the circumstances, Sam would be concerned for the well-being of the kid he hit with his car. He's not. Instead, he's worried about getting his new TV to work so the Baines family can watch The Honeymooners during dinner and lecturing Marty about being in the middle of the street. He gives Marty directions to Doc's house, but when he says a block past Maple, Marty says, "That's John F. Kennedy Drive." Sam hilariously asks, "Who the hell is John F. Kennedy?" Finally, after Marty abruptly takes off, he tells Lorraine Marty is an idiot, which comes from upbringing, and if she ever has a kid who acts that way, he'll disown her, which is hysterical since we already know Marty is Lorraine's son. While part 1 is humorous, part 2 clearly takes itself less seriously, and one of the secondary characters introduced in part 2 who shows this is my next reveal, played by Flea of Red Hot Chili Peppers, Needles. Needles, we learn through parts 2 and 3, has a major impact on how the lives of the McFlys play out. He's the one who first really gets to Marty by calling him a chicken in the future, and subsequently gets Marty Sr. fired. He shows up again as a teenager in part 3, challenging Marty to a race, again egging him on by using Marty's kryptonite, which is name-calling. Marty has finally learned to deal with it, though, and he avoids a collision with a Rolls-Royce, which had been alluded to in part 2. The way these films set something up and then pay it off later is just fantastic, as shown here. Back to Needles, though. He appears only these 2 times, but is paramount to the plot each time he does show up. And he is entertaining when he does. His look is hysterical. His facial expressions are priceless. And it seems like Flea really enjoys playing this character, which is always a plus, especially when someone whose first profession isn't acting is appearing with a Hollywood mammoth like Michael J. Fox. Needles isn't just a plot advancer, he's the manifestation of Marty's biggest flaw. Let's do a few honorable mentions before my 4th and final reveal. You know, it's funny, Back to the Future is my favorite film. The trilogy is my favorite franchise. Yet I feel like this is shaping up to be a somewhat short episode. If I needed to, I could fill an hour talking about these movies. But as gigantic a Back to the Future geek as I am, I've heard so much of it before, and I don't want to regurgitate what's been talked about to death. I'm not trying to be exhaustive today, I'm trying to be unique and interesting. That's why I chose secondary characters. You don't always see them talked about too much. I just wanted a change of pace. The problem is, when you get a character like Needles, mentioned a moment ago, who's only in 2 scenes across 3 movies, there's only so much you can say about him. So as I said, honorable mentions. I've got to go with the Clock Tower Lady. While her screen time is brief and she's ultra annoying, without her appearance, we never get Marty's adventure back to 1985, as he would have had no way of knowing when and where lightning would strike to travel back to the future. So she is a super important character. Not quite on the mountain, but she's one who is absolutely crucial to the story. While not crucial to the story, a nice little setup and payoff is the character of Goldie Wilson. In 1985, we see that Wilson is up for re-election for mayor. In 1955, we see that he was working a dead-end job at Lou's Cafe, but he has aspirations to succeed in life. Marty says Goldie will be mayor. The future mayor of Hill Valley likes the idea. Check out my Goldie Wilson bobblehead. Speaking of Lou's Cafe, the next honorable mention is Lou. Lou is so grumpy. He cracks me up. Always raising his voice to Marty, and I assume he's the same with all his other patrons. He doesn't really advance the plot at all, so I'm not giving him a spot on the mountain, but he does entertain while on screen. Dialogue between Lou and Marty sets up some jokes that were funny in the 80s, with Lou telling Marty, "I can't give you a tab unless you order something." And then when Marty asks for a Pepsi free, Lou tells Marty if he wants a Pepsi, he's going to pay for it. Such a mean but comedic character. Another honorable mention is Red the Bum. Again, not really a plot advancer, just used for comedic effect. Some people think he's the 1955 Hill Valley Mayor, Red Thomas, but the writers say the name Red was simply Michael J. Fox ad-libbing a line. We see him on a park bench in 1985 in Part 1, calling Marty a crazy drunk driver. He reprises his role in the alternate 1985 in Part 2, calling Marty a crazy drunk pedestrian. Also in Part 2, the took his wallet guy. After George knocks out Biff, Marty tells everyone to give Biff some air and that Marty knows CPR. Marty then punches Biff in the face and steals the sports almanac. The guy there insists Marty took Biff's wallet, which he mentions 2 more times to Biff when the antagonist comes to. Finally, to round out the honorable mentions, the saloon guys from Part 3. Actual trained Western actors, these guys are always in the saloon drinking, playing cards, basically just giving commentary on situations, sometimes in a hilarious way, like when one of them tells Marty before the shootout with Buford that he has money bet against Marty, so don't let him down. And Part 3 also brings us my final reveal on this mountain, Chester the bartender. Chester does play a slightly important role late in the film when he tries to revive Doc with wake-up juice, which nearly gets Marty out of the shootout with Buford. Chester is hilarious. After Clara rejects Doc's confession that he's a time traveler and wants whiskey, Chester warns Doc about what happened to Doc on the 4th of July. Chester relents, saying, "I ain't your papa." We find out in a few moments that Doc can't handle his liquor in the slightest way when he takes 1 shot of whiskey and immediately keels over. When Marty finds out Doc only had 1 drink, Marty exclaims, "Just the 1?" Chester's funniest line, though, comes when Marty first enters the saloon and orders ice water. Chester says, "Water? You want water, you better go stick your head in the horse trough out there." He proceeds to give Marty, or Clint Eastwood, as he's soon to be known, whiskey. Chester is used perfectly. We don't see him too much, not too little. He is exactly what a secondary character should be. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by Universal Studios or any creator, cast, or crew member associated with the Back to the Future trilogy or its related properties. Images are sourced from Wikimedia Commons under appropriate licensing. So that's today's mountain. You know, I've said several times, Back to the Future is my favorite film series, so I could have come up with a topic that would have made this episode much longer. But to be honest, I get a little tired of hearing all of the same tired conversations about these movies over and over again from fans. If you ever join a Back to the Future Facebook group, you'll see the same questions and theories posted repeatedly, and it gets irritating to me. I wanted to give a shout out to the characters who don't get as much recognition. I also didn't get into a ton of plot details, just because they weren't always necessary to explain why secondary characters are close to my heart. Some of these really had no effect on plot advancement at all. And yeah, there were quite a few I didn't mention, even briefly. You may like some of the characters I stayed silent on. That's fine. I'm not here to fight. To review my Mount Rushmore of secondary characters in the Back to the Future trilogy, Needles, Chester the bartender, Sam Baines, and Mr. Strickland. I hope you enjoyed the list. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time. Go Birds!